this is a little bit about ITS. We're partnered as a systems integrator with fewer vendors very intentionally in order to be the best at integrating, a few market leaders out there, being Symantec, ServiceNow, and Microsoft. And these apply to the areas on the right there, whether it be the systems management world, the automation world, or in the case of Symantec, this notion of securing users and securing information. In the Symantec community, we hold all of their technical distinctions and deliver services on behalf of about 15 or 16 other resellers now in the Symantec reseller community. We've got a national presence, although we are headquartered in West Michigan. I'm broadcasting today from southeastern Michigan. I live in the Thumb area north of Detroit. So we're going to talk a little bit about Symantec today. We believe in that respect to our business, we've invested in a really good company, but like many of the manufacturers out there, they tend to take some arrows or some fire by customers or especially by their competitors, and that's fine. I think there's a healthy heat and pressure needed there for companies to stay on their toes, continue to improve, continue to integrate further, which is something that we'll talk quite a bit about today. It's a big issue out there is integration. And I always have to come back to this principle of hate the game, not the player. I want to make you all aware we've got some really good thought leadership out there on our website. These cover some core areas of our company and our business and our overall value proposition as a system integrator and reseller. So you can check these out on our website and pull down electronic copies of these, or you can contact a salesperson or a sales associate or our marketing department, and we could even drop a physical printed copy in the mail to you. So the world changed. This is something that we use in the beginning of a lot of our presentations, and it really sets the stage or sets the table for the things that are going on right now in the industry, and it kind of supports why enterprise security has become so difficult. If you look back even 3 years ago, we at ITS believe we moved into another discrete era of IT. There was an uprising of organizations who are treating user experience near or equal to all the other IT priorities and areas. But I like this slide for a number of reasons, because it gives us a chance to kind of look back, and I'm just crossed over into 20 years of IT security experience myself. And we're living in very exciting times. So any Mr. Robot fans out there, Christian Slater, on the subway, exciting time indeed. So if we're thinking about security, right, and if we're in this perspective of recognizing the beginning of the internet era there in the center, and this is really where my career took off. We were largely focused on securing the perimeter and a lot of the infrastructure. The data or the information at the time was still on premises. Hacking was largely driven by the misguided youth. And then, toward the end of that internet era, we saw the shift toward protecting information. The hacking got a lot more serious, more sophisticated, well-funded, and then the data started to move and started to spill out into the cloud. And now we're at a point where the genie is completely out of the bottle, and even just look at like SaaS application adoption. Right now we're in this point where 35% of them are in the cloud today, and it's moving fast. Gartner predicts by the end of this year we'll have that majority will have flipped, where today we're looking at 65% on-prem applications, and they believe that's going to flip where it'll be SaaS that's 65%. Personally, I think it's going to take more than this year to get there. I don't think we should be in a hurry, but the genie is definitely out of the bottle and things are definitely on the move there. The other thing that's interesting about when I got into IT security and where we are now is we used to rule, you know, the IT department ruled with a fist and we were the kings. And in the last decade, maybe a little bit longer, the users have slowly taken over. And what's interesting about that is the user is also referred to and cited even today as the weakest link in all of this. So the user is the weakest link, is yet all powerful or in some cases resourceful and clever at circumventing control, even if their intentions are good and merely trying to do their job in many cases. So, you know, all of these eras and the problems and the hesitation that we've experienced with each era has been problematic, right? So the workload has become cumulative. It's not as if we stopped doing a lot of the things in the PC era or in the internet era to embrace or better prepare for the era of experience, but this has all been very cumulative. So in many cases, organizations, they're just not leveraging the tools that they own, or they haven't solved the major challenges of the previous IT era, let alone the current or the next. So today, every organization likes to think that they are unique. I debate that a little bit. Sometimes they are very unique. They are snowflakes, and in other areas, in other aspects, you can definitely lump them together and begin to pool them. But Josh Burnson, our CTO, believes that it won't be long before every user is unique. So a little bit of philosophy there to chew on. So we believe we've entered this era where the biggest challenge is balancing protection and keeping risk, you know, low and reduced, always reducing for the organization, and keeping, you know, a workforce collaborating and working and playing in this hyper-connected world. So as a company, we believe we are very well and uniquely positioned to address this problem. 3 years ago, when I told people I was in security, I always had to specify, you know, IT security, or computer security. And even then, only half the lights went on with those people. If it was someone in an airplane or you know, someone I was meeting someone as an acquaintance. Today, I can tell a complete stranger that knows nothing about me, I'm in cybersecurity, and their eyes light right up. They usually want to share some personal experience, maybe with ransomware or, you know, fake emails or phishing attempts. My friends and family send me samples constantly. It's become a little bit of a game where we look at them and read them and laugh and cut up. But they want to share some personal experience. So people have a lot more proximity to this than they did even 3 years ago. In some scary cases and severe cases, they want to talk about, you know, some problem they may have had with identity, or at a minimum, pick my brain for what they think they should be caring about. So it's fun to kind of wake some people up that are still lagging on a lot of the technology and the conveniences that we all leverage and enjoy. And while I certainly think that info security is important, notably more than ever before, there's a ton of hype associated with all this stuff, or that's been built up. In recent years, vendors or manufacturers have invested and acquired. In some cases, they have already gone back the other direction and experienced some sort of divestiture. And in other cases, they've consolidated their business. Maybe they imitated someone that made some bold moves in the marketplace, and then things have kind of shifted back back the other direction. even some additions. There are partners and there are resellers out there in the channel that had no discrete security focus that have tried or are trying to get in on it because there's so much going on here. There's at least a perception of opportunity there. So, coming out of RSA this year, and I mentioned this in the invite to the webinar, I'm just feeling the fatigue right now, and I think there's a lot of organizations out there and customers who are also feeling the fatigue of tools. And even if I do attend RSA next year, I'll probably avoid the exhibit hall because I know everybody in there and everyone that I think is worthy of paying attention to. I know about them, unless I go back with mace and a taser in order just to get through the exhibit hall. The amount of calls and the spam I'm getting since RSA this year is at an epic level. Today it was somebody who I love. I love Splunk. Splunk's a great company and a great technology, but I even got a phone call and an email from Splunk today. Or maybe I'll just pocket my badge after I get in the exhibit hall and not let anyone scan me. But just the whole cyber this and that, I mean, it's just so fashionable right now. And here's a big part of the problem: the explosion of tools, suites, platforms. Gartner, Forbes, Investors Business Daily, I think was the last place that I saw these stats around the prediction of crazy growth in the cybersecurity market. So IT security spending is going to soar. Right now we're looking at a $75 billion, close to an $80 billion business. By 2018, it's expected to be well over 100. By 2020, at 170 billion. While there's this notion of growth, and we'll see if it happens this fast or increased spend, I believe things are going to shift as they grow, or as that spend increases. Fewer companies are going to take more share as things continue to consolidate. And when you're looking at your technology partners, consider the long game, consider longevity, consider the financial health of these companies. I think that's really, really important. Are they going to be around in another year, right? So I think we can expect to see more mergers by the leaders and by the companies out there that are healthy. And I think there'll be some others that might go out of business. So I think platforms are what more companies and more organizations are looking for. We can expect more mergers, more consolidation, and I think the companies that have got integrated platforms are the ones that are going to move forward and be part of the future. And there's even some well-liked brands out there, even recently getting some shakeups with issues with stock valuation, maybe the venture capitals that are behind them flexing their muscle, trying to transform or shape the company up, or squeeze more profit out, or increase quotas, or who knows. I won't mention any names, but two of them are definitely on the slide. And while we're there talking about some of the companies up here, I think embracing new technology is a good idea in a lot of cases, but you also have to beware of some of these newcomers out there, because we're starting to see, start to see a little bit through some of the architecture and some of the FUD that they're throwing around, especially the newcomers out there, and they're selling a little bit of snake oil, I think, in some cases. So we've been part of some customer-sponsored bake-offs with old and new technology, especially in the endpoint security area. And I've seen some of this new stuff work pretty well in some cases. And then I've seen some situations where they miss well-known threats, right? So I won't mention names, but there's one particular company up there who's new to the game and is making a lot of noise and a lot of fuss out there. And for every example of how they're beating out some of the long timers in the endpoint security space, like McAfee, Trend, Sophos, Symantec, I can give you a case where they have missed something that is well known. So what good, and it kind of brings this question to my mind, like what good is the protection against unknown threats, which aren't largely being leveraged or exploited like the known vulnerabilities are? What good is that protection against unknown threats when you miss those that are widely known? And when we've got good technology that will stop those are the ones that are being leveraged more so. That 0 days are really scary, but we haven't even really began to really get into that world that much. It doesn't seem. So we're in this mess, right? And I think we need to choose good layer technology that's going to be here tomorrow, and partner with smart people inside your organizations as well as externally, and work with, with your channel and with your other partners and advisors to get the most out of these investments, especially if they were good investments to begin with. And in the case of Symantec, they've got several strong franchises, and I think with the Blue Coat acquisition, and now we've got technology people back running the company, they are positioned very much for a rebound. So what gets somebody hating on a particular technology? I mentioned the cumulative workload, supporting all the different hesitations throughout the different eras. But what makes someone consider displacing SEP, as an example? Sometimes cost can be difficult to overcome, but many of the times, the efficacy of the tool is the easiest to overcome, especially when there's a good explanation or a good reason for it. But you really have to get to the bottom of why the tool may be falling short of expectation. And just personally, when I know this enough, I know enough about myself and my self-awareness, when I'm personally bogged down with too many time suckers, I get grouchy, and I want to blame the things that I don't want to do. It's their fault that I have to do them. And then usually some sort of pep talk, running it by a good friend or a family member that I trust and I can be vulnerable with, will usually give me the perspective, that I need to kind of pull up the bootstraps and move on and solve it, right? Get this figured out. It's easy to blame stuff. And it feels good sometimes, but at the end of the day, you've got to move through it, and the stuff is too important. So sometimes it's those things, and sometimes it's me. And I think the same can be had when you believe a tool or a technology is letting it down. Could it be the tool's fault or the lack of efficacy? Absolutely. Sometimes it is. Could it be something else? Absolutely, could be that too. And we're going to get into a few of these things. But I think that cumulative workload has got us crispy, has got us grouchy. We're pretty fatigued. And when the tool is letting you down, there's a perception of blame the tool. But, have we derivated away from best practices? Are we leveraging a full feature set? Do we have the right people dedicated to operating and maturing the tool? These are all other dimensions of this. And we run into this all the time with organizations where we're brought in to evaluate or assess the environment for adherence to all of this stuff. And we find that sometimes there's opportunity left on the table with the tool, or we find that the tool is falling short of expectations. A considerable amount of the time, though, it's outside of the tool and it's something else. So kind of the people, process, and technology. Technology is a piece of it, but there's also processes and people to be mindful of. So a lot of these tools and technologies today, these platforms, they follow a maturity model or a risk reduction over time proposition in the case of DLP. So some of the concepts that we tend to apply here when we're looking at, all right, are you moving along an agreed to and leadership sponsored or backed maturity model? And some of the concepts are usually starts with some sort of roadmap, right? Do you have a roadmap that laid out a structure for you to adopt or consume, all the technology that you're licensed for? But then I start to think about like enterprise coverage, having good compensating controls across all the potential control points, vectors, levels, networks, data repositories, endpoints, cloud services, and so on, right? The next I would consider the feature sets or the layers of the tool, and that's where there's a lot of value that can be put into question, and sometimes there's good explanations there. And then, do you have the right people assigned to the solution? Do they have the skills, the time to operate these tools? And really important, do they have the passions to put their hearts into this stuff, right? So the endpoint security people, that team or that guy or gal, they need to be passionate about vulnerabilities. They need to be passionate about patch management and about dealing with threats on endpoints. If they just turn SEP on and walk away from it and expect it to just quarantine and delete files automatically, there's some expectations that need to be adjusted there. Enterprise malware is a program, and you need people with passion and with the time dedicated to it, or you need to find the people that can give you that. And then I mentioned the lack of integration with all this enterprise security. I mean, this is a real problem. It's getting better. It's going to continue to get better as more and more of these companies and these leaders out here start developing true integrated platforms. But that's where, companies like ITS have been successful kind of addressing this gap. And often there's some integration, and there's almost always automation to be had. We find that password resets still a big offender and a time sucker for IT. And that's one that definitely directly impacts user productivity. Anybody impacted by, the lack of ability to automatically generate or reset accounts, that's a real bugger. In fact, just today, we received a request from a customer to evaluate one of those time suckers and a costly process disconnect with identity management. So they've already outsourced the servicing of the tickets, but hope to reduce that cost, which is thousands of dollars a day, into some sort of automated process. So it's put a robot on it, right? And another simple personal example, and this one I'll give Wade Wyatt credit for this, our CEO or president. He believes if you have so many square feet of bare or hard floors in your home, you should have a robot sweeper. So those of you know me know I'm a simple guy. I'm not too cool to grab a broom and sweep the floor, but and I used to think that sweeping the floor was therapeutic, and it is on Saturday, but Monday through Friday, when I'm being business cat, I get a lot of value out of letting that thing run while I'm out in meetings or I'm in my office working. So as a father, as a hobby farmer, as an executive, even I can use more automation. The little floor robot, great personal example that I like to cite. So this is a cycle that we see where customers react, to that realization that desired outcomes are not being met. It could be patch compliance, or it could be DLP, incident management. In many cases, this is a people or a team, a mission-ready team problem. Maybe not enough focus and attention to maintain and operate the tools. So the outcome is occasionally put at risk, different times throughout the year. They pick up the backbone, call ITS, we parachute in, bring them back up. Something happens, they lose a person on the team, they acquire a company, there's leadership changes, things happen, they get focused on something else, lose sight of priorities, and then we parachute in. So this is a little bit of a cycle that we see when organizations are bogged down. Often it's a people problem. So I want to get in, I mentioned we're going to talk about Symantec a little bit. So a little bit of a solution spotlight or highlight. I'm going to talk about a couple tools here where they follow maturity models. So these two products apply to this notion of a maturity model. DLP more so than SEP, but even endpoint security, very much a layered approach. And depending on your business and how many people work and play with corporate or personal devices, rolling all these layers out needs a carefully thought out plan to execute against. So both of these products, these are very strong franchises that have been in the upper right of the Magic Quadrant for over a decade. And we don't have to follow every word from Gartner, but I think majority of us out there do pay attention to what they have to say. And I personally think they have a pretty good methodology for evaluating technology. So this really kind of speaks to these two products. In addition, really speaks to the duality of user experience and security. It really shows itself in these two areas: endpoint security and data loss prevention, kind of going back to the beginning of productive and protected users. So we're going to dig into these two a little bit. So here, high level, here's a few things that are going on with SEP that we're seeing. And at a high level, I would probably point out some things that we're encountering in our red flag assessments and working with other customers out there. Symantec and its partners, and we've definitely done our share of this, have connected with a lot of the SEP install base, and there's over 350,000 customers out there. I think that includes the consumer business. But we've made a connection with that legacy install base to enable as much of the technology as possible. And Symantec's not alone with this. Trend's got this problem. McAfee's got this problem. It's a problem with the suites. It's leveraging all the advanced technology in a lot of cases. But even just at a high level within the tool and just at an overarching level, there's a few things that we're seeing lately that are definitely coming up more and more, or we still find is opportunity being left on the table. So a couple things we want to talk about. This notion of, are you corporate or consumer environment? And this has to do with the user override on unlocked policies. So user's the weakest link. We need to focus on training the user, security awareness, yeah. That is really important, but that's going to take time. And while we wait to do that, I believe we need to take the power back a little bit and do a better job of applying the controls in order to better protect the organization and reduce risk. So lock these policies down. If you leave these policies unlocked, and again, this is where the resourceful user comes into play, they can go and they can disable all this stuff and turn these things off, right? So that user override, you want to lock that padlock and you want to lock those policies down, because anything else, you're operating in a consumer model and not an enterprise product level. Another thing that we're seeing is remediation actions not being leveraged. And the concept here, or the principle, is really to let SEP do everything it can possibly do to stop threats. So the secondary conditions, right? After quarantine, SEP deleting the file, doing additional things after just don't quarantine and let things sit there. Do something about it and allow SEP to do more of what it needs to do to stop threats and to automatically remediate them. So that's really, really important. We're finding a lot of consoles where there's just stuff sitting out there in quarantine. No one's looking at this stuff. No one's addressing it. You need to keep scanning those things. Run secondary scans on those quarantines and clean that stuff out and get rid of that stuff. And then the last one is leveraged the feature called Download Insight. And this is what's going to do a checkup against unknown files. With all the malicious file attachments out there being distributed via email, let's get those users who, again, they don't know any better, let's give them some help with verification of what's about to be downloaded or what's about to be pulled down. So Download Insight is is another one of those areas where we want to leverage, leverage this technology. It's there for a reason, and this stuff makes a difference, especially when you're talking about, the threats of our times. So still, top two SEP features not deployed, it's going to be IPS and the firewall. And this stuff, both of these things are key in thwarting something that is rampant right now, and it doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. And it's ransomware, right? So we talked to, I think it was 3 different customers just last month that we met who are having trouble, with threats getting through, with ransomware starting to take a hold on a few systems. But coincidentally, they didn't have these things turned on. Turn it on, you'll be in a better place. So when we're talking about host-based intrusion prevention, unlike reputation-based AV, which looks for known malicious files, an IPS is going to monitor the network traffic stream in order to find threats using known exploits across those attack vectors. So it doesn't look at or inspect specific files, but rather the methods that can be used to get malicious files onto your computers and across your network. So this allows IPS to protect both known and unknown threats even before antivirus signatures can be created for them. This stuff is very cool. So in the case of some sort of extorting executable isn't detected by the AV components, in a lot of cases IPS signatures will still block the network traffic that the particular threat could be relying on in order to generate keys necessary to sabotage your computer or its files. So hopefully you haven't seen this lately, but if you see like a pop-up message on your endpoint or on your computer, it says, system infected, Trojan, .cryptolocker, blah blah blah, then IPS is most likely blocked the threat's network connection and saved you a load of grief. So it's a bad sign, but it's a good indication that it was stopped. Get that computer isolated. You've got an active threat on it. Perform some diagnostics or forensics to identify any malware files you've got active on that computer. Drop a cage on it. Firewall, that's another layer that's still unused. And this one's got me scratching my head a little bit. And every time we run into this, we always ask, and what's going on? Why aren't you turning this on? And I still think there's a mindset or a perception or a concern about blocking things. Back to the productive user, we want people to be able to work and play in this connected world. But I think it's an awareness issue here, in that why? I mean, people are worried about blocking things, but this is a stateful firewall. It doesn't quite work that way. It's easier to use the Windows firewall in some cases, I also think, but you're not getting the policy base that SEP gives them. So there's granularity that you can configure and use with all the other layers and get all the visibility across all these different levels of protection. And it doesn't just block everything on the internet. So sometimes there's some exceptions that need to be made, and you need to kind of train this thing to allow to work and play in this connected world. But if you're not using the Microsoft stack at the endpoint for security, turn off that Windows firewall and leverage SEP if you own SEP. That's my recommendation. So switching gears now to talk about DLP a little bit. If we look at a technology adoption life cycle of the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, the laggers, I think we're in this point of late majority against the technology adoption out there. But what we're finding that organizations are still falling victim to is they're trying to do too much at one time. Like they're trying to roll all the different aspects of a DLP program out at one time. and they're not getting very far down the risk reduction over time proposition. They may have visibility across, you know, data at rest and data in motion or data in use or data at the endpoint, but it's like trying to eat the whole cake in one bite, which I'm a big fan of doing. Just as a personal note here, I like eating a whole cupcake in one bite just to make my kids laugh. But for organizations looking to roll out DLP, it's just not practical, and we find that they just get stuck often in the visibility phase, and they really don't get anywhere. Another thing that we're running into is organizations, instead of leveraging the different layers of or modules of DLP to address different control points or vectors, they're trying to do too much with just the endpoint agent. So in a case where we would really be prescribing a network prevent for email or a network prevent for web to better protect data in motion and secure the perimeter or secure the internet or email egress points, they're trying to do it with the endpoint agent, and in some cases it's just not working, or what we need to do in taking action would be much more appropriate if it were at the network level as opposed to on the endpoint. And then the other thing that we're seeing is organizations are having, they've got too many policies. And if you know anything about semantic DLP, the number of policies that you have and the potential number of hits or matches against that will correlate to the amount of incidents that you have. So we can, in a lot of cases, we're helping organizations clean up those policies, get down to fewer policies, get better accuracy, and get better response rules in place. But it's just creating too many incidents, the notion of too many policies. So similar to what we talked about with SEP, top two things that are not deployed with DLP, and really it comes down to detection and response. In the case of detection, there's a few different levels or a few different pieces of this. Most organizations start with, you know, the regular expressions or described content matching, which is essentially, you know, the masks or wildcards or regex or words, right? And then organizations that are looking to narrow down their detection leverage a little bit more of the advanced technology and get, you know, reduce those false positives, get, you know, your accuracy rate up in the 90 percentiles. They're leveraging technologies like IDM or index data matching or EDM, exact data matching. So IDM, so this is basically a special algorithm that Semantic leverages and that would index unstructured information. And basically we'd be talking about documents. So we would often focus on like Word documents, text files, PDFs, and so on. Exact data matching or EDM, when we're referring to EDM, we're talking about files that are in a more of a structured format, or I always like to compare with tables, right? So like Excel, could be an Oracle database, it could be a SQL database. If there's any access out there still, healthcare, we do a ton of work in healthcare. Healthcare is leaping to solve you know, the problems in protecting information and keeping threats out today. So EMR systems are a great example of where we would apply exact data matching in order to be mindful of, you know, PII being combined with PHI that you know, represents a violation to the HIPAA security rule. And then that, you know, when we're thinking about internal or maybe even proprietary business information, how can I ensure, you know, if I am a chemical company, how can I ensure that my specific information assets are protected with that high accuracy, and give me a foundation to really enforce policy, and that's often by accuracy. So EDM, that's something that we leverage and tune for a lot of customers. You basically leverage a source file associated with the policy where, you know, we bring some data into Excel. We massage that data source to give you high accuracy, depending on if it's data in motion or data at rest. Slightly different approaches there depending on which flavor we're talking about. But if you want to see a cool video on this, we've got one out there on YouTube. Just search for semantic DLP exact data match. So if you really want to feel like you're winning with your DLP program, you need to be leveraging response rules. It's one of the things that customers really appreciate about the semantic DLP product. And one of the reasons why the analysts favor them so much is that semantic DLP has got really comprehensive workflow and process automation that allows one to trigger actions based on policy violations. So prompting the users, notifying the managers, enforcing edge encryption, all that stuff that's critical to getting the most out of the DLP investment. Good DLP is about response. And when we encounter a customer who's got that piece figured out, I feel, it gives me hope. It feels like we're finally getting somewhere with all that stuff. So it's nice to see. But I find that there's still a lot of companies out there who need to invest in these two areas. These are the top two areas that we find are not leveraged. And occasionally what comes up is, even if it's SEP or if it's semantic DLP, we get into this conversation of, well, I don't know if we're getting the value out of it. And this blame game kind of starts, right? And sometimes, you know what, maybe that tool is not right for you, and maybe you need to make a change, or we need to solve this, solve this problem or this business process differently, or we need to, kind of go back to the drawing board. But in some cases, there's good education to be had and awareness. So kind of bringing it back to some conclusions here and kind of bringing us home back to the blame game. Is it you or is it me, baby? I mean, we've got to look at all three pieces of this, because in a lot of cases, a tool that you own today is able to get it done. So I'm trying to provoke some healthy accountability here, because in some cases we are let down by technology. Look, it happens, right? But in many cases, the other legs of the stool are also to blame or a sharing responsibility. It could be a disconnected process, it could be a lack of human attention or engagement. The tools sometimes merely expose a broken process. So we got to be more diligent, asking the right questions and seeking the input to kind of challenge the status quo here a little bit. And I always like to think about, you own a suitable weapon. Do we need to up the ammo in it, right? Do we need to put bigger bullets through it, or we need to change the type of projectile or the powder charge or whatever? So I'm just using too much of using the gun analogy there. But in a lot of cases, you own an adequate tool. We just need to look at how we're using it. Enabling IPS on SEP will block half of those threats before they even get to your endpoints. So make sure you've got the people with the skills and the experience to mature and operate these tools, because even if you fall for a shiny toy out there, who's to say that if you have a people problem or a staff problem, that this is going to solve all your problems? You may just be moving your issue, or you may be, kind of sweeping it under the rug. So make sure you got the people with the skills and the experience to mature and operate this stuff. And if you can do it all and do both, terrific. But many organizations are surrendering to this, again, this cumulative workload, and to decided to partner, maybe in the case of managed services. So if you resign to the idea that you've built a security company within yourself, then you may be interested, or you should be freeing yourself of mundane tasks with automation and maybe even orchestration at a minimum. So, getting some help from a robot. It's the smart people inside, maybe outside, or more automation. We're going to see the opportunity for automation, and organizations don't have a choice. They have to leverage it. So, a big part of what we talked about here was configuring and using the tools to their maximum potential. So make sure you've got the right tools in place to support the key functions. Make sure those tools are selected based on the priority outcomes, right? And well designed and thought through processes. The tools, you know, they're configured to take advantage of key productivity enabling features. That's what we really want to foster here is let people collaborate, let them work and play, but at the same time, let's better protect the organization, keep the organization safe. Prioritize the outcomes. See, we can't do everything best practice. We realized this a few years ago. And really it starts with a maturity roadmap. So a maturity roadmap should exist for your key IT management functions that you've got. And roadmaps, they ideally reflect the specific priorities of the organization and are not overly focused on best practice. You can only do so many. So prioritizing there is key. And again, make sure that it's centered on the productivity needs of the users. Unless you are, you know, someone that I met recently who is in the energy sector, they still run IT with an iron fist. So good for them. But I'm meeting and learning from more and more organizations who are concerned and are embracing this notion of productivity needs for users. It's just the way things are going. So when we're thinking about the mission ready teams, yet I've alluded to this a couple times. Key functions, make sure they've got the right teams in place with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Team members need to have the time it takes to focus on the function. If the team isn't passionate and wise and skilled, based on experience managing those functions, they're not going to be successful. And you can blame the tool all day long, and swapping it out, you know, for something new, for something cutting edge is likely not going to solve it. And then they don't spend time on routine things that should be automated. Focus on automating the most routine and time-consuming processes first. So the tools of the technology, in some cases, are being leveraged to partially or entirely manage manual processes. Those usually jump right out and stand right out. I mentioned password reset. You'd think this would be solved by now. You think we would have figured this out. This is still a huge problem out there. And then when you're thinking about automation, these have got to be centered around well-defined processes. So that's absolutely critical. But it gives you a chance to kind of hold it all to the light and get it right. And then have an ongoing process to revisit, right? So go back to your roadmap. Want to make sure that all these key functions have a regular cadence of evaluation, as well as refinement. And we get the opportunity to take what we find and correct and improve and show that due care and diligence, especially over time. And then ongoing maturity, it's a commitment to leadership level. And ideally people are in place to own that cadence. Leadership owns the plan, but the team and the people below them ideally own that cadence and that execution. So just a couple things on ITS here. There's a couple of ways that you could leverage us for help. We have the advisory services piece, and then we have managed service. Advisory service is more you manage the outcome. We act as a knowledge company or as an enabler in order to come in, help you get a software or get a tool rolled out, get it deployed, get it connected and transferred over into your capable team's hands. And then the other side of that, or the corollary of that, is more of a ITS managed outcome as opposed to you defining the outcome, more of a managed service. So a couple different service models. If you happen to need help there. Will location awareness apply if I only have AVAS enabled? So this pertains to SEP. Will location awareness and location awareness, that, you know, that's definitely another one that I could have thrown into the core in the core SEP trends that we run into. We still see a little bit of confusion or lack of leveraging location awareness. So will location awareness apply if I only have AD/AS installed? So okay, you're teaming up perfectly here, because this is an area where, you know, we've got a little bit of beef with standard AV client being your endpoint security approach. So hopefully you've got good reason why you're not leveraging all the other layers of protection. That's a big part of what this webinar is about. But I don't believe location awareness is specific to any particular feature. So it will apply. I believe it only applies to antivirus and anti-spyware, but I don't believe there's a feature set dependency there. I'll double check that, and if I need any correction or clarification, I will reply to you in an email and get you the answer to that. So here's some contact information. If you want to reach out to us, I highly recommend visiting our website and pulling down some of our thought leadership around systems management, service management, or our doctrines of productive IT management. We've got some different papers out there that may be of interest to you, and look for us on another a webinar coming up here very soon. So I appreciate everyone's time today. So thanks again for joining us today, everyone. I hope this was useful, and I wish you a great day.